When I was 17 and reckless, I dated a girl who feared nothing. Together we discovered every vice, and after school we'd slip away into a haze of smoke and wine coolers and explore each other's bodies until dark. One day, she told me about a secret garden where fruit grew even in the winter. Eating it gave you a lift better than any orgasm. I'm not sure if she knew that garden belonged to a witch, but either way, she didn't tell me, and I followed her blindly over a high brick wall. It was just as she said. Surrounded by the bitter snow stood a small green tree, its branches bowing under the weight of the peaches. When I picked one and took a bite, the world blossomed into 1,000 colours. I saw every falling snowflake at once in perfect detail, and how that shape too belonged to a greater whole, out, 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 into the spiral of the Milky Way. It soon became our daily ritual, and we spent the better part of a month there until we picked nearly every piece of fruit. We should have worried, but we were young and stupid. In all that time, it never occurred to me that someone was living in the house that adjoined the garden. The place was weather-beaten and crumbling, barely fit for rats. Of course, I should have known better. Each night, someone carefully collected the discarded peach stones, the cigarette butts, and beer bottles. Someone was shoveling the snow when it grew too high. It was only as she plucked the final fruit from the tree that I saw her, looking out from the house's single unbroken window. The witch's skin hung from her bones as if she were long dead, but her eyes were as bright as any child's. When she put her hands to the window pane, I saw her fingers were a foot long each, tapering to points at the ends like tree branches. "We need to run," I said, but the girl was too busy staring up into the face of God. "It's so beautiful," she said. At the window, the witch had disappeared. Somewhere in the house, I heard the rapid beat of footsteps down crumbling stairs. I ran, sprinting to the wall. I jumped high as I could and hoisted myself up. Looking back, I saw her approach. I called her name, and our eyes met one final time. She smiled at me dreamily. The witch stuck a long finger into the spot where her neck met her back. It pierced her windpipe and emerged below her chin, blood gushing from the wound, dyeing her whole front crimson. Her body went limp, but that light was still on in her eyes. Suddenly alert and terrified, she gulped at the air like a fish. The witch held her up in the setting sun, hoisting her as easily as if she were built of cotton and paper. For a moment, the old woman and I met eyes. She blew out a white breath, almost whistling. Something stabbed at me, like ice stabbing my heart. Then the witch smiled, took the girl by the leg, dragging her inside. I never saw her again. The police didn't believe in witches, and when they visited the address I gave them, they found an empty lot. I cried and raved and told them to keep looking, but most of the cops just rolled their eyes. One younger officer took me aside though and handed me a crumpled up piece of paper. "I know you've seen her. The other guys won't get it. Honestly, it's easier for them to just let her take you. Pretend it never happened. If you want to live, you can, It just won't be easy. I looked down at the paper in my hand and considered throwing it in his face, but I slipped it in my pocket and walked away. At night, I could hear a scraping at my window, a little louder each night. At times there'd be thumps on the roof, and then the air would freeze around me, so cold that I could see my breath in the moonlight. Other times the air would fill with the smell of ripe peaches. I'd feel the sudden urge to open the window and jump out into the darkness. One morning, I woke to find 5 pinprick holes in the glass, so small they hadn't even created cracks. The winter air blew in as I remembered the witch's breath, and I sensed my time was running out. I uncrumpled the paper the cop had given me. It was an address downtown, an infamous block where you had to watch your step to avoid the discarded needles. I put on my heaviest coat and walked there, only to find an empty lot. "Hello," I called out. There were a few old men sitting against a wall, eating plain slices of wheat bread. 2 ignored me, but the third rose and walked over. From the dirt caked onto his face, the rank odour of his overcoat, I could tell he'd been on the street for longer than I'd been alive. "She blew you a kiss, didn't she?" he asked. "You don't need answer. I see it on you. Old Tom here knows these things. You haven't got much time left unless you listen to me and listen careful." I didn't respond, but I felt the ice around my heart stabbing at me softly. "Tough curse," said old Tom, "nigh unbreakable, but it can be lived through, if living's your goal. Is it?" I shrugged, unsure. "Do you want to live or not?" he asked, growing frustrated. "I won't ask again. Ignore me and she'll come for you. You'll wake up one day to find her standing over you in bed, your heart draping in them long fingers she's got." Now I was shaking, because I knew he had seen her too. "I don't want to die," I finally said. "Tell me what I have to do." "It's easy, and it's hard," said the man. "All you have to do is say the witch's prayer at midnight. The hard part is that you've got to do it every day for the rest of your life. If you fuck up one word, you miss midnight by a few seconds, and she'll come for you. Fall asleep at 11:30, sleep through the appointed time, you'll wake up dead. You get me?" I nodded. "So what's the prayer?" He raised his hands and he whispered, "We who have eaten the fruit and seen the other side, ask mercy from the mother with the empty womb. For we know that broken hearts can't hide the ice that lies inside our body's tomb." Old Tom made me say it with him after that. Once, when I missed a word, he slapped me hard across the face. "You sure you want to live?" he asked. The next time I got the words right. Together we said them over and over again until I knew it by heart. "Remember," he said, "every night from now on, you've made enough mistakes for a lifetime, pal. You don't get another one." That night at 8, I started getting edgy and opened a bottle of wine. After half a glass, I started feeling sleepy, so I pulled it down the sink and made a pot of coffee instead. I missed the girl hard, but she was dead, and I was still here. I wasn't ready to join her, but I couldn't help let my mind wander to the taste of her skin, or the way she'd smile at me with a cigarette dangling at the corner of her mouth. I suddenly realised I was intensely bored. All of the TV shows that had made me laugh before seemed mind-numbingly insipid now. Finally, I picked up one of my grandfather's old books and started to read. It's a dense volume of Dickens I could barely comprehend, but as I kept chipping away at the meaning of the old words, I felt my mind start to loosen and comprehend. Some long frozen creature coming back to life. At midnight, I said the prayer, for the first time in a while. And for the first time in a while, I felt safe. I went to sleep with the book in hand. As the days went by, everything began to change. I'd become used to waking up sick and hungover. Now, for the first time since I'd met the girl, I felt okay. I'd wake before my parents and walk through the dark, sleepy neighbourhoods. As weeks passed, the walks became runs. My smoker's cough soon disappeared, and my doughy body firmed up. School went from an impossible chore to something bearable. I pulled my D's up to B's and even A's. My future plans pivoted from dead by 27 like Kurt and Janice to college and more, pre-law, a family of my own. And one day as I was jogging, I saw the house. It was just like I remembered, except this time, smoke was pouring out the chimney. I slowed as I approached. Everything in me screamed to run, but I couldn't help myself. I needed to take another look. I hoisted myself up to the top of the red brick wall, and there was the tree. It was spring now, and the fruit was riper, more plentiful than I could have ever imagined. It seemed impossible that the branches wouldn't snap under the weight of it. Sitting in the shade of the tree sat the witch. She was eating something, chewing slowly, as if enjoying every last bite. At first I thought it was beef jerky, but then I realised the truth. Beside her lay a corpse, its skin leathery, firm, as if it had spent all week in a smoker. As I watched on, she sliced off a thin strip of thigh with her razor fingers and brought it to her lips, smelling it like fine wine before she put it to her lips. Then she noticed me for the first time and she smiled. She beckoned to me and then struck the tree, causing an avalanche of fruit to fall in the soft grass around her. When I stood frozen, she speared a peach on one finger and held it out like a candy apple. When I remained still, she tossed it at me, a perfect arc that I caught in two hands. For a second, I stared at the fruit and imagined seeing the world explode into magic just one more time. Then I watched the witch take another bite of the corpse and my stomach turned. I dropped the fruit and ran home as fast as I could go. In college, I met a few girls who liked me, but I knew they'd never understand. I couldn't risk going to a party, not even a single beer. If I missed my midnight curfew, I knew the witch would return for me. And so I spent my nights in my room, studying, watching the clock, and dutifully at midnight I'd recite the prayer. We who have eaten the fruit and seen the other side. As I finished one night, I thought I heard an echo of the final words. Our body's tomb. Sure enough, I peeked out my door to see a young girl on her knees in the dorm lounge, just finishing the same prayer. Sorry, she said, getting home. I thought everyone was out at that midnight movie madness thing. Not us, I said. We've got midnight plans, don't we? Permanently. She met my eyes, suddenly curious. So you've seen her? She asked. Aye, back in high school, I said. Her name was Natalie, and though I didn't know it yet, she was the woman destined to be the mother of my child. She'd seen the witch too, though her encounter was a little different. Her and a group of friends had stolen a truck They didn't even notice the fruit in the back until they'd returned to his friend's farm. All day they sat in a cornfield, munching on stolen peaches and watching clouds turn into angels and whales. Then, as night fell and the fruit ran out, the witch arrived. They were so blissed out they didn't even notice her until she was on top of them. Long nails, piercing one's eye and poking through the back of his skull. She went through the group quickly, killing most of them while they were half in a dream. Only Natalie survived, jumping in the truck and driving away as fast as she could while her friends screamed for her to come back. All through college we remained inseparable, running through the foothills of campus, studying together, and of course, saying our midnight prayers. I wasn't as blissfully in love with her as with the other girl, but she was dependable in a way I'd never know, bringing me morning coffee, running flashcards with me when I struggled with my classes. When she got pregnant in senior, not once did I pressure her one way or the other. I let her decide. And when she made the choice to keep it, I gave her a ring. It wasn't the way I'd wanted things to be, but I loved her, and she said yes. We held the wedding privately on the beach, just the two of us and an officiant, a local minister who agreed to a reduced fee. Later we sat in the dark sand watching the stars come out, and Natalie pulled out the bottle of champagne from a cooler in the trunk of her car. "Natalie," I said, "you know we can't. The prayer's coming up soon, not to mention the baby." She just laughed. "I thought about that," she said. "One sip won't kill us, or the baby. I will do it right after midnight, so I'm not taking any risk." In a way, she had a point. Drinking right after midnight was probably the safest way to go. I didn't want to say no to her. "Not on our wedding night. Maybe," I said. At midnight, we said the prayer together, and I popped open the bottle. I looked down at the waves and I saw her there, watching us, the surf curling around her ankles. "Natalie," I said, "look." The witch walked slowly towards us, dragging her long fingers in the sand, leaving 10 narrow lines in her wake. "You can't touch us," Natalie shouted, standing and taking another drink. "We said the prayer. We didn't stutter. We got every word." The witch came closer, and closer still. 20 feet, 10 feet. I felt my icy heart beating like a hummingbird's wings. She was so close now that I could smell her rank breath and see the red-brown stains ringing her mouth. "Please," I said. "We did it right. We did everything right." And then she walked right past us. There, in his car, was the officiant who'd married us just a few hours earlier. He was dead asleep. The witch opened the driver's side door and lined up the sharp fingers of her one hand with his chest. The witch opened the driver's side door and lined up the sharp fingers of one hand with his chest. She pushed forward suddenly, burying the hand all the way up to her wrist. When she pulled it back, she held his heart, white crystals gleaming in the moonlight. The man looked dreamily at it, and then he was gone. I screamed and closed my eyes. Grabbing the bottle from Natalie, we watched as the witch dragged the man through the parking lot and back out to the ocean. The marriage had started badly. But that brings us to Emma. She came just a few weeks later, just after midnight. I still remember the contractions hidden mid-prayer, the way Natalie struggled to say every word with perfect diction. But she did. Then Emma was there, barely even crying. I felt her heart beating in her chest, and I knew we hadn't passed the curse to her. I wept at her perfect warmth. As I kissed her for the first time, I looked out the hospital window and saw the witch there, watching jealously. I remembered hearing once that she coveted the flesh of children most of all. The witch tapped her long, sharp fingers on the glass and smiled hungrily. She didn't enter, but she stayed there all night, waiting patiently. The marriage that had started with murder began to get worse. The 12:01 drinks got more and more frequent until one day she decided she could get started at 11. After all, she said, we could say the prayer a little buzzed. And then one day, she mumbled as she said the final line. Instead of tomb, the word came out more like thum. I tried to correct her. Maybe if she said it all over again, she'd be okay. Maybe she wouldn't come. But Natalie wouldn't listen. It's fine, she said. I said it's fine. And then she went downstairs to drink more while I held our baby and I cried. The next morning she was gone. All that remained was a trail of blood leading from the couch to the front door, which lay open, rocking, rusty on its hinges. So many bleary nights would follow, times when I thought I'd never keep my eyes open. We fought off colds and flu, Rosella and croup. Sometimes I didn't sleep for 2 days, but no matter how tired I got, I was always ready at midnight. I refused to let that bitch rip my heart out in front of my daughter, or to leave her an orphan, alone with my body in our small apartment. And so the years passed, one midnight at a time. Emmy's now 8. She's bright and sweet and whole. If I had known love like hers when I was younger, I never would have gone wandering. I never would have met the witch. Every day after school, she returns with armfuls of pencil sketches, all for me. Usually there are thus: a queen and a princess, a mother cat and her kitten. At night, she snuggles up to me in our double bed, tucking her cold feet under my stomach, falling asleep as I say my prayer. And that brings us to last week. It wasn't anything I did. I've never backslid once, not one drink, never a late night partying with friends. I just got sick. Maybe COVID, maybe flu. I could barely walk to the bathroom. I couldn't catch a breath. During the worst night, around 10 o'clock, my body was just giving up. I was so tired I had to sleep. So I set an alarm for 11:45 and told Emma that if I slept through it, she needed to wake me. I told her if I couldn't say my prayer at midnight, the witch would come. She nodded and said okay, but I could tell that she was scared. And then I fell into a deep, dark sleep. I awoke in the morning alive, but alone. I cried out for Emma, but there was no answer. I couldn't breathe. I ran to the door and threw it open. She wasn't in her room. She wasn't on the couch. I imagined the scene as it must have played out. The witch approaching my body just after midnight, finding the sleeping child beside me. The way she must have reached into Emma's tiny chest with her razor fingers. I fell to the floor, sobbing, cursing the witch, cursing myself for ever summoning her in the first place. I was ready to go now, and I called for her to come take me to be with my baby. Dad? I looked up to see Emma holding a plate of burnt pancakes. I ran over and hugged her, my lungs burning in my chest. "What happened?" I asked. "Why didn't you wake me up?" "You seem so tired," she said. "So at midnight, I just said to pray for you. It's not like I haven't heard you say it a million times." I held her and I sobbed, not knowing if the curse was broken or if it was just getting started.